Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, August 18th, 2022. This is the Environment Committee of the City of Rehoboth Beach. I'm calling the meeting to order at 10:31 a.m. Thank you all for being here. Going to do a roll call vote. Sorry, tongue-tied today. Mr. Charlie Garlow,
Pleased to say that I'm present with such a great crew of people.
Mr. Eric Seward,
Present.
Heather Metz is absent, Joseph Vesio is absent, Miss Mary Peck,
Here.
and Miss Nettie Green is absent. The chair is present. We have 4 of the resident committee members, and we have a quorum to conduct business. Approval of minutes, we have and these are updated minutes? Okay. We've got several meeting minutes that were updated, taking out some of the clarifying the dates of the meetings. That is July 21, 22, April 21st, 22, March 17th, 22, February 24th, 22, and January 7th, 22.
The only ones that aren't available are March.
And March has not yet been sent to you.
Right.
With that, we have the 4 sets of meeting minutes needing approval. Is there any questions, discussion?
Question, the March minutes that are missing, are those the March of
I
20,
don't think they were done.
March of 22 or March of 21, or which?
22.
22, well, there's March 17th to 22 meetings listed here on the agenda. I didn't know whether those were the ones that are missing or, okay. Well, we'll try to find them, I guess. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I move that we approve the minutes that are available for approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes dated July 21st, April 21st, February 24th, and January 7th of 22 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the 4 meeting minutes are approved. I'd like to identify, we've got a few folks in the audience today. Thank you for being here. We have City Arborist Liz Lingo here with representatives from Sussex Tree and Spizzato. Thank you both for being here. We've got Ann Womack helping us control the meeting. I'm going to change the agenda and go right to, because we have guests that we'd like to get their opinion and perspective. I'm going to move to item B of old business, which is discussion related to gas-powered landscape equipment and use of them in the city of Rehoboth Beach. A brief background, as I think everyone knows, Lewis has adopted a phase-in change in their ordinance, which would ban certain gas-powered landscape equipment over a period of time. As such, we've also been considering doing that here in Rehoboth. So I'll let my committee members add anything to that, and then we've got members of the public that we'd like to hear their perspective. Thank you.
I would just note that we have had in the past citizen comment and correspondence complaining about the noise, et cetera, from gas-powered equipment. That's partly why this arose.
That is one of the main complaints of residents, is just the noise from the gas-powered equipment. Mary, do you have anything to add?
Not yet.
Okay. Well then, I'm going to open it up to hear from members of the public. Specifically, well, I think I'll just reserve the right to ask members of the public questions while they're up, if that's fine. If You guys, if you want to come up, I don't know if you want to, why don't we have Sussex Street come up first? If you wouldn't mind, I think we may just generally ask your opinion on phasing these, phasing out gas-powered equipment, get your perspective, and then we may ask some pointed questions, if that's fine.
So a little background, we've been using battery-powered equipment in our business for probably roughly 2 to 3 years. But I'll clarify that on, so.
Excuse me, could you introduce yourself?
Sorry,
first?
I'm Jeffrey Meredith with Sussex Tree, the vice president, father is the owner. So probably about 2.5, 3 years ago, the company Husqvarna introduced a lot of commercial equipment that we can use in our business, and we kind of have a pretty strong partnership with them. So they allowed us to kind of like play with them to kind of see how we felt they fit in. We immediately adopted them, and what I'll say is we use what is available for us to efficiently do our business, and what that means is our smaller chainsaws for climbing, which would be this size saw right here. And then hedge trimmers for like shaping bushes and stuff. And then also what's called a power pruner, which is basically imagine like a pole with a saw on the end of it, okay? And a couple different versions of each of those tools. So a lot of pruning activities we handle all day long with those type of tools. But unfortunately, when it goes to larger scale removal and stuff, we still have to rely on gas-powered equipment just because the technology just isn't there yet for us to adopt to those type of equipment. Meaning this is the most powerful saw on the market for a battery, and that's not very big. So we can do prune with this, but we can't remove large-scale trees with it. And essentially, I had a meeting with Husqvarna yesterday just to kind of brush up on some of my, in case I was asked some things I wasn't sure of. And essentially what I've been told is the battery is a limiting factor currently. In the lithium ion, they just can't get the power output for a sensible duration in order to make a larger saw. So they don't have any timeline on that, but that's kind of where they've kind of hit a point where they really can't go any further. So on a saw of this size, we can usually get about a half an hour of run time before we would need to replace or change out the battery, which is, on a saw this size, comparable to how long a tank of fuel would take to burn through it. So pretty close 1-for-1 as far as the performance of saws this size. So a lot of what we do is pruning for certainly, so we handle those activities all day long with this type of equipment. It's just really when it goes beyond that, we're kind of challenged with currently with what's available to us as of right now. So I want to make sure there was nothing else I missed that I wanted to mention. Oh, cost perspective, there's an initial investment of, obviously you have the cost of the tool and then a battery cost and then a charger cost. Typically the initial investment is greater because you have to buy all these things. But once you get an investment of batteries and chargers and such, then you're just buying replacement tools themselves. The tools by themselves are less expensive than a gas-powered version. But when you factor in the battery investment and the charger investment, they are more expensive. Usually, roughly about almost double the cost of what a comparable gas unit would be. They last a long time. We've had some batteries that we still haven't replaced. We've been using them solid for 3 years, so they do have pretty good longevity. They advertise that you get 2,500 charges per battery, which is a lot. So really no issue there. I don't know, that's pretty much, I don't know if there's any specific questions about that, but I know we hear complaints and noise all the time in what we do. So for us though, that equipment is honestly not the noise factor. The noise factor is all the other stuff that's required for us to do our job, like the wood chippers and, stump grinding equipment and all that kind of good stuff. The only piece of equipment that they have that I guess we could adopt that we have not is their backpack or blowers. We do have a couple handheld blowers that are battery powered that we will use in small pruning scenarios. But again, we use still use gas powered blowers right now, just because the backpack version, or the versions that would be comparable in battery, do not still have the power that we require to like blow sticks and chips and all that kind of good stuff. So unfortunately, that's probably the one thing that they could offer us that it's just the technology just quite isn't there for us to stay efficient at what we do. I mean, that's pretty much it.
So it sounds like regardless of Lewis has adopted policies or Rehoboth, you guys are moving towards
Correct.
electric equipment anyway.
Yeah, I'll say about us personally, I had a lot of pushback initially from some of our employees because like, this is ridiculous, not using a battery saw. But the advantages over time is the equipment is a little lighter, so it's easier on your body, and the ergonomics is a little nicer. And using this, there's no constant pull starting, right? It's just pushing a button and instantly you have power. So that kind of stuff over time, employees started to recognize that there's advantages for them. You know, it's easier to push a button versus pull starting something 1,000 times. So it's funny, those same employees who I got all the initial pushback now, if I was to give them a gas powered version of whatever it is, they don't even want to use it. So it does have its advantages both ways. And I mean, we've seen it in our business, and it definitely has helped for sure. And also, there's another component of when it comes to, in most cases, repair is a little less expensive because there's no internal combustion engine to be. So there's still techs that have to be trained and all that kind of good stuff, but repairs have been a little less expensive and typically a little faster, and you don't have to worry. It also eliminates the possibility of bad fuel wrecking something. So I mean, there's definitely advantages in that regard as well. So
Taking all the pluses and minuses into account, do you find it is more financially beneficial to your company to have gas equipment or electric equipment?
I would. I'd say the battery stuff for how we use it and the pieces of equipment that we own that we do use it for, I think it is more beneficial. Just the fuel thing alone, I mean, with the way the ethanol is now, if you let something sit for 30 plus days, it's not going to start. The fuel will wreck it, and then it turns into a big service bill. You can let this stuff sit forever, and it's not going to be an issue. And honestly, like a lot of what we do is a loft, right? We're either tied in some ropes in a tree or using some type of lift or something, and just the better ergonomics and less weight on the joints and stuff of climbers and aerial operators and stuff does have huge advantages for sure. And they are a little less. They don't weigh as much. So when a climber has to climb through a tree, a lot of times they'll have one of these on their belt with them, and if what's on their belt is weighs a little less, that has advantages for them as well. So, yeah, I mean, I full arms wrapped around it and made our guys start using it 2-3 years ago, and I've seen the advantages for us. Now, again, like I mentioned before, there's only certain things that are available to us right now, but for the ones that are, they make a lot of sense. So,
Would you quantify that by saying electric systems are 10%, 20%, 30% cheaper than gasoline systems?
well, they're not. They're actually more expensive right now.
I'm talking about all the pluses and minuses.
Over time, yeah. I don't know what the value is, but for sure, we've probably saved money through efficiency, so less time doing whatever the task is, and also for the employees themselves, less wear and tear on their body, less frustration. I mean, that comes into play too. And then when it comes to service, like having to repair things, and it's a lot. So far, it's been, unless someone runs over it, but normal wear and tear has been much easier to deal with. Also, if, let's say that scenario happens where someone runs over this thing, right? The batteries are still good, and the cost of this tool is less expensive than if I was to buy a brand new combustible engine saw. So And it's probably, after you buy all the batteries and stuff, it's probably 25%, just the tool is 25% less expensive than a comparable combustible engine saw. So for sure, there is cost savings moving forward, for sure.
You guys are a pretty big company, probably one of the largest. Would you understand that not all landscape or tree removal companies would be able to make
Yes.
that initial investment that you guys have?
Yeah, I definitely would see. I mean, having the advantage of having multiple crews and a lot of employees and stuff, probably a little easier for us to take on a responsibility like that versus like a guy and a couple, you know? I mean, we kind of rotate our equipment very often, so we're always constantly replacing to make sure it's in great shape. I understand that sometimes couldn't always be a luxury that others could have. We have reasons why we do it and makes sense for us, but I totally could get why that wouldn't make sense for someone else. So yeah, for sure. And also we have some relationships with manufacturers that give us some advantages that probably because of the purchased power we have versus someone else that maybe wouldn't have the same discounting advantage like we have. So it would be a little more difficult for them probably to take on the financial burden, I guess.
Does Husqvarna have like a full circle, like a take-back system? So when they are done, will they take those back?
Well, I actually asked about that yesterday. So right now, there is no plan with batteries. Their plan is basically you discard them.
Is that, okay.
Yeah, so there's really no, I was told a few years ago they had a system where you would bring back the battery and then they would do something with it, but then they kind of stopped that. So there's really, it's kind of like, Kyle was explaining to me, it's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell policy, just like, you know, there's no plan, like kind of what to do with it. So where our local dealer, where we purchased the Husqvarna, I asked them, what do they do? And they said, we just collect them and then we just take them to like the landfill, basically. So there's really, I was told there's really no current plan on how to deal with that. Now, since we've been using batteries, I probably have only had 5 that I've had to replace. Of course, we've added 2, but so it really hasn't been an issue yet, but at some point, we'll have all these batteries that we need to do something with, for sure.
Yeah, we had a gentleman here last month that owns a environmental friendly landscape company, and I think he was just about 5 years plus on his batteries and had not had any issues yet.
Yeah.
So it seems like the longevity is lasting a lot longer than some people even expected.
Yeah, and they're factory sealed, so even weather doesn't affect them. So in theory, you could drop, I'm not trying, but in theory, I've been told you can drop it underwater and pull it back out and it's not going to affect it. So.
Could I ask about non-battery electric equipment, like for your big chainsaws, or you're taking down a huge tree or something? Are there any gear being developed that would run off of a power cord?
They have that now, but it's not commercial grade, I guess. That would be, it's more, that type of system is mainly targeted towards like a homeowner. Commercial grade, there's nothing that available. Plus the fact that you'd have, there's situations where that would probably be cumbersome and or could cause another potential liability issue with having to drag something like that through a tree or whatever.
I was thinking that the bigger chainsaws might be down at the ground level rather than up in a tree.
It depends. They can be. I mean, there's certain situations if the tree's large enough, they'll have to carry a chainsaw with a 36-inch bar into a tree just because of how big the tree is at that point where they need to make a cut. So yes, normally they're typically used near the base of the tree, but if the tree is big enough, they would need to bring a saw appropriately sized up into the tree with them.
Probably that's a small portion of the total efforts that you're involved in, and the noise, I guess, as a result.
Yeah.
So Lewis has a ban of the handheld equipment effective December 31st, 2025. I guess you're aware of that.
Yep.
And I just want to get your sense of how
So
doable that is.
we've talked about it internal because there's situations that are going to come up that a discussion is going to be had because it's not going to be physically possible to do what we need to do not using a combustible piece of equipment. And or if forced to, we could maybe figure out a way, but the cost implications would be significant because the amount of additional time it would take to do something versus using an appropriately sized piece of equipment. And specifically, I mean tree removal. So yeah, we can remove trees with this size saw to a certain size, but then it gets to a point where it's just not physically possible anymore. Because the bar itself just isn't long enough to penetrate the entire perimeter of the tree. So I'm assuming at some point that probably is going to come up in a situation where I guess a decision/discussion will be had about what is to be done, because it's not just the way we do with the equipment we have. I mean, it just doesn't exist. So I'm curious if and when that comes up. Well, what's going to happen? I thought that I had read, maybe I'm wrong, or they at least discussed that there was a pass on chainsaws, I thought, but I could be wrong.
I don't think so. I think all handheld gas power equipment, including chainsaws. But, so do I understand you correctly that the main issue that you see is for tree removal as far as the technology?
For us, yeah. As far as handheld equipment, yes,
Yeah.
correct. The other activities that we do, yeah, we can easily do with what we have what we have available to us right now. And it's really just the battery saw is, I'm trying not to bore you guys, but so like I mentioned, this is the most powerful saw available for battery right now of any manufacturer, okay? This is comparable to a 45 cc saw in gas, okay? We typically use 70 cc's or more when doing removals. So it's like half of what we would, as far as power, of what we would normally use in removals. So again, there's probably small trees, obviously, it can remove with a saw this size, but most of what we do in removals is not trees that small, it's a lot larger. So, and again, the technology just isn't there, so it's not that we're turning a blind eye or unwilling to try, it's just not available yet.
And what size blade is that?
So, good point. So this is a 14-inch bar. This saw is powerful enough to run up to 2 inches larger, so a 16. But when you step the size of this up, then the battery power goes down and running length goes down because you're turning a chain 2 inches longer the whole distance.
So that 14-inch is the most efficient with the battery.
Correct, absolutely correct. And we use saws up to 42 inches, so and even 50. So obviously, you know, this would be a toy compared to a saw that size.
We've got members of the public here. I'm going to open it up to if you've got any specific questions for Sussex Tree. No? Okay. Any other questions from the committee?
No. I do. About the blowers, the backpack blowers, are there specifications that you have to meet for your internal purposes to blow the twigs around and stuff? I mean, at my house, I just get out a rake and get the twigs out of the way.
Right.
What is it that you would have to have or you would want to have before you move to a electric backpack blower? Because I think those are the ones we hear a lot of complaining about.
Yeah, it's funny that yesterday when we were talking, that's what the Husqvarna rep said. He goes, most of the complaints that they hear on their end is just the noise that are generated from backpack blowers. We do have handheld battery blowers that their pruning crews will use often, just because what they're doing isn't dramatic with cleanup. But I guess part of it comes down to like efficiency with us. So yes, we do. I'm saying we do rake for sure, but the faster, it sounds terrible, but the faster we can get something done, the less we have to charge for because of all the people there on the job site. So in a lot of situations with large takedowns and stuff, we need the power of a backpack gas blower to kind of make the cleanup even faster so we can kind of get to the next job or be done or whatever the situation is. We have not tried, because they actually have a backpack version of a battery-powered blower that has batteries that basically stick into the backpack. And we've not tried it just because each of our crews now have about 6 batteries, and the only way we can charge them is through an inverter through a diesel truck while we're on job site. So basically what they do is they turn their truck on and they plug their inverter in for 15 minutes, charge the battery if they need to, if the 5 doesn't get them through the day. The backpack blowers, the problem there is the challenge for us is it would then add 2 more batteries that we would need to somehow figure out how to charge possibly in the middle of a day, which we're already kind of taxed with trying to make sure all our batteries could be charged in the middle of the day depending on how often we're using them. That just the charging becomes the challenge at that point. Because the backpack blowing version really, really sucks the juice out of them.
How about plugging in at my house when you come to do that?
Well,
Use the house current.
You're not as nice as a lot of people we work for. So often that's not an option. Additionally, we are often doing jobs in the middle of, there's no one's house around when we work for the state or whatever. That sometimes is a consideration, and we for sure do that when possible, but it's not always possible. Sometimes we work for people who aren't around, and we typically we ask our employees not to do things without asking prior. So sometimes it just doesn't really lend itself to having that option.
I understand battery technology is improving all the time. Do you anticipate the battery improving by 2025 to comply with Lewis?
Well, what I was told yesterday is they feel that the Husqvarna feels the limiting factor is the lithium-ion design battery. So it probably what we're seeing now won't get much better until they come out with something different than lithium-ion, is what they told me. So probably, if I was to guess, things will get a little better as far as run times and all that kind of stuff, but we're probably breached our technology with handheld until someone comes up with a new technology, is what they told me.
As to recharging in the field with your diesel engine, I'm going to be shortly taking possession of a E-Lightning Ford F-150 electric truck.
Yep.
So that I can charge off of that into anything I want to. Is that something else you might be considering?
Well, right now, those trucks aren't large enough. F-150 platform is not large enough to tow our equipment. It doesn't have the towing capacity. And right now, they don't offer anything above an F-150 platform, so that probably wouldn't be reasonable as a business model for us. The other option would obviously make the guys carry around generators, but then that obviously increases expense, and then one other thing for us to kind of like track and keep a hold of.
Would an F-250 electric truck take care of that problem? I mean, I'm sure they're going to be coming out with better stuff all the time.
Well, we use F-350, 450, and 550, so it'd have to go up quite a few steps in order for us to kind of consider that. And the other thing is too, the 300-mile range on an F-150 is only if you don't tow. If you tow, it's half that. So, and what that would be rated to tow, it is not even close to what we tow. So I would probably say we'd be lucky to get to and from to Bridgeville and back to our shop on a range like that, towing than what we're towing. So
we'll be sure to get you a chance to drive that, try it out later on.
I'm a Ford person, so I'll definitely try it.
Great, me too.
Any additional questions?
So I do have one question.
Sure.
So you mentioned your group has been using for 2 or 3 years. So I think you're a pretty big company. I don't know if they track injuries and injury rates associated with that. So, I mean, I'm just looking at things that, you have one back injury, you have one carpal tunnel shoulder injury from yanking, that raises everything. I can have you seen a decrease in injuries?
Yeah, I can give you a real-world example, actually, with our employees. We have an employee who's been with us about 26 years and has always kind of been on the pruning side of the business. So the power pruners I described before, which is kind of imagine like a pole with a saw on the end of it, he'd probably been using the gas version of those for, let's say, 20 years, right? And his joints are give him issues, I guess. And since switching to the batteries, I wouldn't say it's made him better, but it for sure has given him some better longevity because it's not as hard on his joints anymore. Pull starting and the weight of the actual tool is less too. So a lot of times I have to hold these things kind of above their head and so it for sure has given him, I guess, a new light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. So I mean, most of the time in our industry, injuries aren't really because of gas first, they cut themselves or whatever. But I mean, fortunately for us, we have a very, very low mod rate for tree care. So I can't really give you an example of just other than maybe their joints of the actual employees isn't as difficult on them as it once was.
I just didn't know if you had a safety guy there that, has maybe been tracking that, just seeing
Not
if you
that
see a
specific
decrease
issue.
in incidents or anything. But
No,
maybe
not a specific
That's
issue.
okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you. Subzada, you want to come up, introduce yourself, and give us your perspective?
Hello, my name is Andrew Ryan. I'm an account manager at Sposato Landscape. I think I would agree with a lot of what Jeff said. It was all really good information. Back in 2019, Mr. Sposato, myself, our vice president, Mike McCoy, we actually attended the GIE Expo, which was held in Louisville, Kentucky at the time. And we spent a lot of time checking out all the new battery equipment, and it was really interesting. And we actually got set up with Steel and Husqvarna, and they outfitted us with some equipment to try out. So we tried out weed whackers, we tried out the backpack blowers, and we had blade edgers with a power blade on them to do curbs and sidewalks. So for the past 2 years, we've been using them in Lewis and Rehoboth intermittently, back and forth. And I think that things have worked out pretty well, but like Jeff said, from a commercial standpoint, to say that we would be able to manage the whole city with that equipment, I don't think the technology is quite there yet. And like Jeff said, the battery technology seems to be the limiting factor. For us to say that we'd be able to mow, a 4-acre property with a mower like that, the run times on those machines just aren't ready to handle that yet. And then on those machines, the batteries are not removable, so you can't swap out during the day. So it lends to, what exactly is the crew going to do in the meantime? I know for sure that the industry is moving that direction. And I think that a lot of the bigger companies are outfitting and testing and seeing what the limits of the technology are. But like I said, right now, I don't think it's quite ready for full-scale commercial use.
What percentage would you say of your current equipment have you already switched over to electric or battery powered?
I had 2 trucks. There was one truck that ran the Lewis route. There's one truck that ran the Rehoboth route. In all our company, we have, on any given day, I'd say we probably have 50 or 60 vehicles, mowing trucks that are out on the road. So it's more in the testing phase right now. But
One thing we heard from the landscaper who is all electric is that he has multiple batteries strategy. So that's how he deals with rather than trying to charge the battery during the workday.
right. Yeah, the trucks, they were all set up. Every truck had 5, it was either 4 or 5 batteries on there, and that worked out fine. But again, with the mowers, it just wasn't possible because you can't remove those batteries on the job site. They're set into the machine. You've got to take it into the shop and actually take it apart if you're going to change a battery out.
Even push mowers or just the
Yeah,
the
actually,
ride?
the push mowers, they were outstanding. So for a residential property in Rehoboth, I think that they're outstanding. They're really efficient. They work out great. Like Jeff said, those little handheld blowers, they're great. We have our pruning crews are set up with those as well. For mowing, it's a little bit more difficult, but for a residential property, I think the battery technology is fantastic. But again, from a commercial standpoint, for a company, a larger company handling big properties, it gets pretty difficult. There's some logistic things that need to be worked out before it becomes really, really feasible.
Does your company have a policy with your employees about not idling your vehicles around town?
Yes, I do, yeah.
We have received complaints specifically about Sposato idling trucks around Rehoboth, so I would hope that you try to do a better job with getting that to your message to your employees.
Absolutely.
Do some of the manufacturers of these mowers, these are larger mowers that can't be swapping out batteries, or are they
Yeah,
just?
so a lot of the machines that we're using, some of them are, 60, even up to 72-inch decks. And they are just now starting to come out with commercial grade mowers that are battery operated. But again, I think it's gonna be a couple years really before that technology's ready. We haven't demoed any ourselves, but when we attended that GI Expo, we got to see a couple of them and see how they operate. And we talked about run times, and it's just not ready yet. I think the run times, they were getting like 4 or 5 hours out of those machines. And, normally our guys are working 8 to 9 hours a day. So you'd have to take it back to the shop and get it charged up in the middle of the day and then bring it back out. Just some logistic things that aren't quite there yet.
So given the size of the lots here in Rehoboth and what we have to cut, I guess I ask, you've got a test crew out there. How difficult would it be to say something was passed where we had to use all electric and for edging, mowing, and for blowing? Would that be?
Residentially, I think it would
Yes.
be feasible. I know for sure, like I said, we've been doing it for about 2 years, and the efficiency's actually been very good. And like Jeff was talking about, it's actually nice using those pieces of equipment. There's less moving parts to break down. We found that we have our own in-house mechanics. We're spending less time working on those, on the handheld tools, the weed whackers that are battery powered, the blowers. We're spending less time working on those than we are on the gas counterparts. So again, residentially, I think from our perspective, I think that it's something that we can make work. But again, from a commercial standpoint, it'd be a big ask.
Yeah, I understand that, yeah.
Well, we've got some time before 2025 rolls around, so
We do,
maybe
yeah.
this will all work out.
Yeah. Like I said, I know the industry's moving that direction. I know the technology's changing and growing all the time. But I haven't actually met with Husqvarna or Steel or anybody like that, but based on what he's saying, the battery, I've heard that the battery is the limiting factor. So I don't know what kind of advancements in technology we'll have in the next 3 years, but obviously everybody's keeping an eye on it.
Do you guys use electric vehicles at all?
Right now, we don't. No, we don't have any. We have a couple hybrid vehicles. A lot of our design team and office staff have the Priuses, the hybrid vehicles, but we don't have any fully electric vehicles right now.
Additional questions?
We would certainly invite you to try out some electric vehicles, as we talked about
I'd
earlier.
love to, yeah.
No other questions?
Knowing that you guys do work in Lewis, I'm sure you're aware of their ordinance and the timeline. What is the biggest challenge for you adhering to that, besides the big mowers?
I guess the biggest challenge is just the financial transition of saying, all these machines and equipment that we have are going to have to be phased out, and we're going to have to make the investment to get all the new equipment phased in. Like Jeff said, I think a lot of our employees are on board with it. It's easier to work with, but it's really just that the logistics of transitioning to a new fleet of equipment is the biggest challenge.
So if I heard you correctly, you said you guys usually have about 50 trucks and crews out?
Yeah.
And only
depending on the time of year, yeah.
Right.
I would say it's a pretty good average.
2 of them are outfitted with
Correct.
electric?
Yes. Mhm.
Does that mean that none of the other vehicles have electric, or?
They do, but these ones are fully 100%.
Full
Yeah. So all the
100%.
other vehicles, and Jeff knows about this, they have those little battery-powered chainsaws on there if they need to take limbs off. They work fantastic.
Okay.
But I know that there's limits to, the size of what you can do with them. But every vehicle, I guess, at this point
Some.
yeah, right, but not fully outfitted.
So would you say that what portion of your work is done in Lewis and Rehoboth? In other words, could you use some of this gasoline equipment you currently have until it falls apart from old age in areas outside of Lewis and Rehoboth and reserve your capital equipment purchases for Lewis and Rehoboth that would be electric? Does
That's
that make
kind
sense?
of the plan that we're working on right now, yeah. That's the direction that we're moving.
And what percentage of your work is done in Lewis and Rehoboth as opposed to all the rest of the area that you cover?
Of our whole service area, I'd really be guessing, but I would say it's probably in the ballpark of like 30–40%.
Is in those 2 smaller areas? Okay,
Right.
great.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being here and offering your perspective. Ms. Lingo, do you have anything to add or anything you'd like to say?
The only thing, there we go. The only question I think we should ask both of them is if we instituted a no gas-powered equipment, chainsaws, mowers, etc., what would the anticipated costs be? Now we're looking a few years in the future, but would we see, yes, we would definitely have to raise rates. That's what I think we need to ask because we owe that to the public, and then balancing that nuisance factor with it's going to cost more. So I don't know if you guys can answer that or not and put you on the spot.
Yeah, would you guys,
I mean, now, like,
if you wouldn't mind, just because it's recorded and everything.
For us, that'd be a difficult question to answer just because of everything we do is so situational.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know what the situation is going to be until we're called to it, meaning the type of equipment and size of equipment and such that would need to be, to take care of whatever that situation was. But let's assume for a second that that there was no option, that we had to use only electric handheld equipment, and we can only assume it's what's available right now, right? Because we don't know. I would say it would have significant cost impact because it's going to take us a lot longer to do our jobs because we'd be forced in the situations, not all, but situations to use underpowered equipment to do the same job, which would then take us a lot longer time. So for sure there would be a cost increase. I just couldn't even guess what it would be. But there would be some situations where I'm not sure how we would do it because when I was showing that saw as a visual, the bar is only so long, and if the tree requires something bigger, I don't know what you would do unless you went to like a back and forth motion or something. So, but yeah, there would definitely be increases in cost. I just couldn't guess because it's what we do is so situational. Right. Not to put him on the spot, but it might be a little easier, like judging in a property maintenance because it's kind of there, it exists versus what we would need to do.
I think also what we heard already is that there's cost saving as well involved in electric equipment. There's upfront costs, but then there's lower maintenance costs. So it's not a simple, this is more expensive, so your customers are going to be injured if you have to go to electric. I think it's a lot, over the long run, it may even be less expensive. So I guess we can't answer that.
Right. Yeah.
Do you want to share?
Yeah, as far as the question of how it would affect rates, I think, and again, we're guessing about what's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years. You're talking about theoretically equipment that doesn't exist yet, but I'm sure that initially we would have in the transition period, there would be an increase in cost. I don't know how that would look over, a 10-year period, how that would change out, if it would actually be more efficient for us in that manner. It seems like it would, and that's obviously why the industry is part of the reason the industry is moving that direction. But I think certainly in the short term that there would be an increase in cost in order to transition the equipment.
Did the 2 crews that you have out that are all electric, or I guess you have pick and choose those customers that you're using for that?
Yeah,
Was
was
there an increase with them? Did
No.
they see an increase, or was it just, okay?
No, there wasn't. And we specifically went through and we built these 2 routes to where we thought that it would work out pretty well. We decided we were going to test it on some really small properties, and we were going to do some mid-sized properties and then some larger properties because we wanted to kind of get a full gauge of how this is going to work out. And what we found is for a lot of the properties that you have in like Rehoboth or Lewis, they're very small lots, and there was virtually no difference in efficiency or anything like that. What we actually saw again was that we had a decrease in maintenance time and cost in the shop to repair it because there's less moving parts. The mid-sized properties that we were looking at, and we're talking about at this point, I would say, 6,000 square foot lawns, it got pretty difficult. And we weren't testing mowers there. We're talking about for handheld equipment for blowers and for weed whackers. It definitely took longer. I think, off the top of my head, I think it was taking the guys in the ballpark of like 15 to 20% longer, and a lot of that was because of the blowing. And briefly, like I said, we tested some larger, like retail, commercial properties, and it really wasn't efficient. To have the guys, it really wasn't even feasible. To have the guys try to go blow off an entire parking lot with these blowers, it didn't work out. But again, technology could change over time, so.
What about, have you used any of that electric equipment doing, I know you've got a contract with the city of Rehoboth to do the medians and some other areas. Have you used electric on any of those larger spots?
We did, actually. City of Rehoboth is kind of funny as a property because there's really not that much mowing, but there is a lot of labor time as far as the guys having to walk up and down. So it's kind of a hard one to judge on. But we did use the battery powered. We used the push mower and we tried the weed whackers around the circle. We tried it there. And again, the problem wasn't with that. The problem was with the blowing. It took a long time to get everything cleared off up to the standard that, everybody expects.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Anything from the public? I want to thank both of you for being here and Liz arranging for them to be here. Thank you. Any comments about how we move forward? I mean, I think we're at the step now where we need to put in writing our proposal so we can vote on something and put it before the mayor and commissioners if we want to move it forward.
I agree. We're at that point.
I would say that the city of Rehoboth ought to follow the leadership of Lewis, and maybe we can be leaders in our own right by setting a higher standard for folks to meet, not only these gentlemen, but others who are in this industry, and that hopefully would spread the good word to the rest of Sussex County and the state. It's up to us to make a better future.
The only thing I guess maybe we could talk about, from everything I've heard with our small lots and the way the industry's going, and at least in terms of these two companies, it sounds very doable to phase out the handheld equipment by 2025. But if we wanted to talk about tree removal, a large tree removal as a separate area where perhaps we would take another look at what the technology is, just based on what I heard today. But I think for routine maintenance kind of landscaping around here, everything I've heard is that it sounds like it's definitely very doable to phase out the gas.
Yeah, I see this broken out into probably 3 different categories: just routine, residential, landscape equipment. And I think that needs to be broken out into then 2 areas, one serviced by a commercial company and one serviced by residents. And the timelines may need to be different. I don't know if, my parents down the street should be forced to buy all new equipment that they only use, not that often. So I think in that area, it needs to be broken out into 2. I think tree removal needs to be broken out separately, and riding mowers needs to be pushed out. And maybe we don't do anything with that at this point, but put it on the radar that we need to reevaluate it in 2 years and see how the technology has changed. I don't know if those are the answers, but in my mind, that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
I think those are good ways to look at it. I would hope that we would establish a standard or goal by 2025 that will meet all of these equipment needs, and then see what problems might arise, and then at that time evaluate it and make an exception, rather than making an exception now and saying, oh, don't worry about even trying to get to that standard.
I don't disagree. So I would certainly preface that in a whereas clause if we do, that it's a goal, but the reality is we need to reevaluate it before that date to make sure it's still a realistic goal. So someone needs to take a lead on putting all of this on paper so we can move this along. Mary, is that something?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right, well, I think that is a path forward. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Liz, thank you. Um, Back to old business item A, just want to give you an update on having a special meeting related to the wind farms off our coast. The mayor and I and the interim city manager have been meeting quite a bit, speaking with different groups. We continue to plan to move forward at it will be some date in the last week of September, where we will have a special meeting and have invited panelists to come. We are going to make it very clear that this is informational, and questions may be asked, but it's not for opinion. This is an informational presentation. And one of the things that I know I've gotten some questions and comments and specific panelists that this committee has recommended. And if you have anything additional, please email me those, because we'd like to solidify all of that before having this special meeting. Additionally, we can only have so many people come to speak and give their opinion. So we're also trying to put together a resource package, if you will, or a sheet with links to different organizations that would give their opinion or their one-page statement, a position statement. MER may have a different opinion than the Cesar Rodney Institute, which has a different opinion than a commercial fishing group, which may have a different opinion than a recreational fishing group. So if we can gather all of these things, that would be great. So if this committee is aware of any of those, if you could send me links or one-page position statements, that would be very helpful. So this is all gathered ahead of time, and a resource package is available for those attending that meeting.
No, Ed, you said that you had been to, was it with the Coastal Mayors Organization, or was it with with BOEM, where you found out a lot more information about what's actually out there and what's being proposed? And I wonder if part of your presentation is just going to maybe have that agency enlighten everybody what the current status of all the projects are, and where they're going to be located. Things are changing all the time, and I think most people really aren't that aware of what's really in the pipeline right now.
Yeah. Without getting into detail on specific groups or agencies, most of my information came from speaking with some of the groups that I mentioned, the city officials in Ocean City and Fenwick, as well as U.S. Wind directly, that I just became more aware of where all of these projects are in the pipeline. And just about that time, the U.S. Wind project had just gotten, everything was submitted to BOEM a year and a half ago, but BOEM just accepted that package as being complete enough for review. And I think that process, the review period, started, I think, 4 or 5 weeks ago for the U.S. Wind project. The other Ørsted project is a little different in that I think they submitted their information, or started submitting information to BOEM 2 years ago, so before U.S. Wind, but BOEM has not yet accepted that package as being complete. So none of that is public information yet. So we now know things about the U.S. Wind project that we still don't know about Ørsted, because BOEM has not accepted that as being complete, and none of it's public yet. So we're hoping that we get more of that information. And yes, the process in which these organizations have to go through, where things currently stand, all will be part of a systematic presentation, so we get the full picture.
Well, one thing that's been my impression about the way this has been going for a while, you have some groups that are just against offshore wind, and then other groups that are 100% for, because, obviously climate change. But there are a lot of people that just want to understand, are they really doing a good job of evaluating environmental impacts, impacts on the ocean, doing the best job they can to minimize those kind of things. And I wonder whether you're thinking in terms of this presentation, I would like to see have a good understanding of how the agency reviews that kind of thing, and also perhaps, and I think I've heard that, for example, the National Wildlife Federation and some of the other big environmental groups have kind of looked at some of this stuff and evaluated it. If we could have that aspect, I think for a lot of people, that's something would be very helpful. All the people that are not as sure about what to make of it all, rather than just, I think we all understand that we have to get to clean energy, we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but we just want to be assured that this is being done in the most responsible way. Yeah.
Yeah, I agreed, and part of this will be to understand the environmental impact and how BOEM looks at it and what they look at as part of the process. And then, of course, from other, from resources with other groups, whether it's, wildlife or marine advocate groups, we'd also like to hear, maybe not hear from them, but have resources from them on whether they think BOEM's review process is sufficient or not. And then we have to make a determination. I don't know that we have the capability of taking on BOEM and the federal government on their review process. But again, this is going to be more informational,
Right.
so people have a better understanding.
Well, I think what I have heard from an Ørsted representative who's has watched some of our discussions about this, and BOEM is very much weighs the coastal towns' positions, and is definitely wants to work with the local governments to the extent that they have concerns. So I think it's not like we wouldn't be able to, from what I heard, BOEM would be responsive or receptive if it was coming from the city of Rehoboth Beach itself that we had a concern and we wanted to have it addressed. So, and I know they kind of do it through the group, that network of all the coastal towns together, but they definitely, from what I've heard, BOEM would be receptive.
I agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that part of this would be to understand the process and the public input, when and where and how the public can give input to BOEM. There's a few different stages where that's relevant or possible. Additionally, and these are for at least areas that are already solidified, but they're also, BOEM is now looking at new call areas as well. Thankfully, all of those, I think, are east of the current leased areas. So view shed should not be one of the concerns, because I think we're talking, 25, 30 miles out. But again, just for the public to understand that process and when they can weigh in is important. So I just wanted to give any additional updates on that. I just wanted to give a brief update. I think we're moving along and we've got a good plan. And I think Rehoboth may be a leader in educating people in this area. So I'm very happy about that.
What were the dates again in September, or we're still thinking about that?
Tentatively, September 27th or the 29th. I hesitated being specific because I don't want the Cape Gazette to say Rehoboth is doing a program on the 27th, so I'm just going to mention that. But definitely, we're looking at the last week of April to be able to have something. September, I'm sorry.
April, September, they're all
Thank
out
you,
alike.
thank you. With that, I'm going to go to old business C, which is pollinator garden proposal. Charlie, if you want to take it
Yes,
away.
I provided some copies of this electronically to members of the folks here. I have a few extra copies that people in the audience want to take a look as well.
I've read it.
You
It's
read it?
very
You got
good.
it?
Yeah,
Okay,
I've got
Mary,
it.
you got this already?
I didn't have a chance to look at it.
Anybody else want to see it? You did look at it. It's a draft proposal about pollinators and pollinator gardens in Rehoboth Beach.
And can you put the camera up over there?
Oh, that's a good idea. I took into consideration the discussions from last month in which our minutes said that Charlie would redraft this proposal, keeping in mind the three main components, which were native plants, pesticides use, and physical planting of the gardens. Under this draft proposal, the native plants, we noted in Delaware that it's no longer legal to sell invasive plants or to import, export, sale, transport, distribution, propagation of any of the invasive species. So we want native plants as part of the state Statement of Agriculture's position on that topic. We also want to promote native plants under this draft proposal since they're good for pollinators and other people, critters. The second element is pesticides, to the extent that pollinators are killed by the pesticides that might be broad spectrum and not only kill pests that we want to get rid of, like mosquitoes or something, but they would also be killing pollinators. So we should, to the extent possible, try to phase out or ban or restrict overuse of pesticides, both for the city's lawn equipment, lawn areas, or for residentials as well. We're, of course, open to exemptions for residentials because they're not as sophisticated as the commercial operations. Last one was the planting of gardens. That element would be some process or method to encourage the removal of lawns, grass, which doesn't help pollinators at all, and replacing them with beautiful pollinator gardens that include flowering black-eyed Susans, purple coneflowers, milkweed, all the things that our pollinators need and that make our environment look lovely at the same time. I even put out a suggestion we might have a certificate of excellence to award people and to thank them, like a pat on the head, if you will. And there are references to pollinator.org, which has a whole lot of different programs they've set up to encourage these sorts of things. They've got a share program, which is saving, simply having areas reserved for the environment share. You like that acronym? So there are a number of different areas that we could talk about, but I think we're running a little late, so I'm going to cut it short there and ask if you, Chairman Chersnowski, want to dig into this any deeper or not.
I think the revised the draft of the proposal is, I think you've done a good job.
Agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. The one thing I just want to mention that Liz, when she was here a couple months ago, seemed to prefer, instead of referring to pollinator gardens, native plants. And she had a lot of reasons about how it's a broader concept than just pollinators, but it's really, I guess that's just terminology, but, and then the other thing, I wondered, you know, the area up near the the Henlopen, where they have the parking at the beach, there's like a triangle there. Did the city swap that out to native plants?
Yes, there's a new planting going on just south of Rehoboth in that triangular area you're talking about. And the plants that were put in there are supposed to be native plants. I think a lot of them are blooming flowers that would be helpful to pollinators as well. I don't know that it's 100% pollinator friendly, but I think they did a pretty good job. We could probably improve upon it if we try again a second time.
Well, how about up on the north end of the boardwalk, where the tot lot is, where they, there's just this area that I think it used to be grass, but now it's kind of a lot of, taller plants, and it looks a little random, but at the same time, it looks like, when I was looking at it more closely, like maybe it was something more intentional.
I believe Liz did tell us about that, and it was intentional. And one of the things that our arborist said in one of our last meetings is that these pollinator-friendly gardens often look unkept.
Yeah.
And people complain about it. And I think what that cycled back to a lot of things here for me is, well, we're not educating the public
Right.
that this is a pollinator garden, and it looks the way it does because it is. And
I think this one spot in particular, she might have mentioned, because the first impression you have is, oh, this used to be grass, now it's not cut anymore and it's overgrown. And so that's why last month I was thinking it would be nice to have signage in that particular area stating that what the whole idea is, so that people understand it. I think we do have, when we replanted some of the dunes along the boardwalk, I don't know if imagining this, but somewhere I thought I had seen some signs about the dunes and what was going on up near the Village Improvement Association area. And I think that kind of thing will really go a long way for some of these projects.
Well, the more that we replace lawns with pollinator gardens, the less we'll have to worry about lawn equipment making noise and air pollution.
It's all ties together. And I do want to just say, I put milkweed on my property, and I have monarch butterflies flying around out front, and it really works. It's really cool. And the milkweed, which maybe looks a little like a weed, but it likes it there, it thrives, it kind of filled in, and now we were so excited to see a bunch of monarch butterflies flying around in our front yard. And we have people walking by our house that stop and say, look, monarch butterflies. So, it's kind of a fun thing to do.
I'll see your, what was it you just said? Pollinator, plant your milkweed, and I'll up you a Joe Pye weed.
Yeah, Joe Pye weed. That's another term. Yeah, but that's the other thing about native plants. They thrive, and they don't need as much of the chemical input and maintenance that grass obviously does. So. But the Delaware Nature Society has a program where you can get a little sign that says certified wildlife habitat or something like that, and it just requires that you plant a certain number of native plants on your property, and there's a whole program that we can sort of promote that a little bit more too, if you want to get into acknowledging work that people are doing.
I think your idea of the sign, at least bring that to people, because I think there's one also on State Street there at the little corner where you go to the wastewater
Yeah.
treatment plant. There's there, and I rode by and I'm like, oh, they didn't cut the grass, but I looked a little closer, and
Yeah.
you can tell that I think that's been put there. But to your point, educating the public again, and letting them know, hey, this is what we're trying to do. you know,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, maybe just a couple signs in these areas to advertise.
And the other thing
Really.
is, in the building permit process, when you get into the lot coverage restrictions that we have, and maybe we could have something, some kind of, I don't know whether out and out incentive or just informational, when you're doing, because every time somebody builds a new house here, they have to redo their whole landscape anyways. And, you know, understand the advantage of doing less grass and native plants, and especially people who, a lot of our properties are rental properties, and the owners would prefer not to have a lot of grass to have to cut and deal with and fertilize. And so, you know, it just seems to be a no-brainer to me if people understood what the issue to go in this direction.
A lot of new homes are built and they'll just roll out new lawn so it has the finished look. Sort
Yeah.
of like indoor, outdoor carpet, only it's
Yeah.
grass. And that's easier to throw out there than to have planted native plants or pollinator-friendly gardens.
I know, well, when we did ours, our contractor had a part of it in there as, you know, the sod and the, you know, it's sort of automatic. And I said, no, I'm not going that route. And they were kind of perplexed, like, what are you doing? And then there weren't a lot of companies, be honest, here in Sussex County, I had to search for a landscape designer that knew what I was talking about and understood what I wanted, although I think it's becoming more knowledgeable, and even getting some of the native plants, and maybe it was a COVID, another one of these shortage things, but I had a hard time sourcing plants, so it's maybe easier said than done to some degree, but I think if we start pushing it more, maybe some of the plant garden centers will start carrying more of these things, and so it's a process.
Well, you know, for this particular proposal, you know, I would prefer not to get heavy in legislation, other than to recommend to the mayor and commissioners and perhaps the stormwater task force look at incentives. If they are looking at ordinance changes, they consider incentives to encourage pollinator gardens, less grass, things like that. What I would prefer to focus more on with this committee is education recommendations. These are a list of resources that we should put in the city newsletter. These are things that we hope that the city arborist recommends to homeowners when asked. These are resources that should be put on the website. I don't know that we, as a city, want to get into recommending certain landscapers or garden centers, but why not partner with Rehoboth Beach Main Street and the Chamber of Commerce to identify native, knowledgeable landscapers that we would recommend, and have them link the resources to their website, do some cross-promotion. I know Rehoboth and Bloom and the folks at Rehoboth Beach Main Street, they've currently have a few grant proposals out there for education and pollinator gardens. I don't know that these are huge amounts of money, but these are areas where this committee can, through one representative, partner with these groups to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And I don't think that it's forcefully through legislation or ordinance, is my perspective on it.
I think that's great. Most of what's in this proposal is not mandatory or code change provisions, but is more in the lines of encouragement, education, and that sort of thing. Although I will point out that when it came to idling ordinances, our city had a policy position to urge people not to do idling, and yet the problem persisted. So we may need to revisit it after a while if it's something that we want to do. But I think at first, you're quite right. Education and encouragement is a great first step.
Any other feedback on this? So Charlie, how do we want to move this forward?
Well, we could have people give input on this draft, and if there's changes that you would like to see in it.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot more. I've been reading more about this. I think, oh, I can add that in there. Pretty soon this gets to be more and more paper. But I try to keep my proposals short so that people will actually look at them. But if before next month, people have comments on this, want to send them to me, I can change it around for another draft, another round of drafting, and then vote on sending it forward to the mayor and commissioners.
Right. That sounds good. I've got a few thoughts I will send to you specifically. Thank you, Charlie. You've done a lot of hard work on this, so thank you for that. We've got the Public Works Director, Kevin Williams, here. Kevin, I'm sorry, you're probably here for two items I probably should have taken up after item B. One, I want to give a very quick update on public water bottle filling stations. I know I've asked that in the new plan for the Baltimore restrooms and beach patrol station that be incorporated in the design. And I think with discussion of the interim city manager, that will be planned. There were two, I think it was through DENREC and C grants. There was a thought that we would be able to put one or two filling stations at other areas in Rehoboth. My understanding is that grant has since fallen through and is not an option here now. So, but I have talked to other people within the state, and there may be some additional grant opportunities that I'm working on with that, as well as when we get into the budget season in starting in January, I'm going to encourage that we at least hope for grants, but budget for a couple of these things. Kevin, I don't think you were working on this too much. I think it was with Evan doing most of the communication against the filling stations, but do you have anything to add?
Just that we did apply for the grant. We were hopeful of getting two and a minimum of one. We didn't get either one. So our thought at that time was one at somewhere on the Boardwalk, and we were thinking at the Baltimore Avenue restroom would be a good location. It could just replace an existing water fountain that we have right there. So the construction of it, the installation of it would be very easy. And then the other one we were looking at was out in Grove Park to catch the bike trail folks as they come by and have a refill station similar to what they have at out on the bike trail over closer to Lewis, I think, where you'd get a bottle station, a drinking fountain, and then a dog bowl or something along those lines. So those are still kind of in our thought process. It'll go into the budget this year. We would probably look to do one. Certainly the one at the restroom. If the restroom moves forward, we would probably put one in down there.
Do you have an idea of the cost?
A slight difference between if you want one that has filtered water versus one that just has tap water, but it'd be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10,000 total. Yeah, it includes
for
running the water line to it if you need to and that kind of thing. I think the device itself is in the 7,000 to 8,000 range.
Yeah. Well, those are both really good locations to try it.
Mm-hmm. That was our thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at least, I don't know that this committee has to do anything. I just wanted to update, but I'm certainly going to push that we budget for these things for the next fiscal year, and hope that we get some grants. There are grants out there, but that we still budget for it, even if we don't get grants.
And it's another great project. Yes, it's kind of small dollars to be, in the big scheme of things, that if there's money remaining, at the end of the FY that doesn't get spent on something else, that, we'd have it available because we've modeled, we've done all the research on the model and locations and that kind of thing. So it'd be a very easy thing to execute at the end of the FY if there is money available.
Thank you, Kevin. Next is an update and discussion on the Boardwalk recycling program. At our last commissioners' meeting, we were informed that there is quite a bit of contamination happening. So if you could just give us an update on that and kind of if there's anything that we can do to help solve that problem or recommendations to be made.
All right, I think Evan might have briefed at the last board meeting that we're seeing a significant amount of contamination, and that I think Commissioner Gossett asked for kind of a roll-up at the end of the year. You know, we've been tracking it by month, so we know of X number of bags, how many we've been able to recycle versus how many have had to go in with the regular trash because of contamination. And I don't want to get ahead of that.
Right.
But, you know, it's a very low percentage that we're able to take and recycle, you know, way less than 50%. So.
Any things we can do to help?
Yeah, other than just having, you know, people out there standing around watching what gets thrown in there, probably not. A lot of liquids obviously going in. You know, it's only got already has the holes just for cans and bottles, but, you know, we still see people lifting up the lid and throwing other stuff in, getting a lot of diapers, you know, which are not the best. So people just, you know, I mean, it's, I guess, human nature these days to do what
The
they do.
signage is better than it used to be, like it was, I think one of the problems was it was a little confusing in the past, so I think it seems like it's not so hard to understand, at least.
I think the people that want to do it, and the ones that don't care, I mean, don't care.
They ruin it for everyone else.
Right, right. So I think ultimately it would be a decision if, you know, we want to continue to do this. I mean, it's kind of the right thing to do. So do we want to do it because it's the right thing to do? Not that we're saving any money by doing it or, you know, making it easier for us by doing it by any stretch. But it'll ultimately come down to that, I think, based upon, you know, the preliminary results of contamination rates.
Do you think it's that there's enough regular trash cans available? Is it an issue where the trash cans are full and then they feel like they have to put it in the other one, or?
That's a great question, and I don't really know the answer to that. I can check with the guys and see if the ones on the ends where there's a little less, you know, of the trash, typically, if they're less contaminated than the ones in the heavily populated areas, more heavily populated business areas. That's a good thing we should look at.
Right. Thank you for that update, Kevin. What I would suggest is we get a committee member here to volunteer to maybe do some research and see what other communities have done in terms of education, signage, compared to what we're doing to see if any improvements could be made. I mean, we may, one thought that I have is, you know, we've got a couple organizations in town. We've got the VIA, we've got Rehoboth Beach Main Street, we've got other state environmental groups that maybe just a few times a year we get volunteers out there and just standing next to these things and reminding people what can and cannot go in. And I think it would be a great outreach. So something like that. So I think if you guys want to continue to monitor this, talk about it, and see how we can help improve it, we can look at things like that, or, you know, we can just wait till the end of the year and get an update and see what happens.
Sounds like a good idea.
Okay. Well,
Got a question out here in the audience.
oh yeah, please, Carolyn, come on up. Yeah, just push the switch in the back there. Yep, there you go.
Hi, Carolyn Diefendorfer, city resident, and I had sent this to Ed, but can we get, well, I agree, we need to make sure there's lots of garbage cans beside the recycle bins. Other cities do it successfully. I mean, I was just in Nashville, and they have garbage can, recycle, composting. They have all three of them there together. But if the big culprits are, you know, you hear pizza boxes, and I wouldn't have guessed diapers, but those types of things, if you can even put stickers on them that says no pizza boxes, no diapers, you know, and maybe have arrows and have trash cans on both sides saying, you know, I don't know, but I think it's really important that the city set an example and recycle. If we want residents to recycle, there should be, you know, the city should do the same thing. But I do get the cost aspect, but I just think it's really important to try to find a way to keep doing it. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. All right. I think what I may do via email, because we've got a few people, committee members that are not here, is to get someone to sort of take the lead on this and maybe thinking about educational signage recommendations, looking at what other communities do, because I mean, this works fine at a lot of other places throughout the country. So what can we do to improve
Well, I
it?
think what Kevin's saying is, you know, we're doing it, but what's the success rate, you know? So what are you digging in deep, you know? That's why I say I've been Nashville, places like that, you know, but you don't ask that final question and go, you don't go behind the scenes and go, okay, well, what is? So maybe I can, I don't know, with maybe some Kevin's help, where I can look in and see what the towns are doing, you know, at least, are they getting success rate, are they getting better success rate? And what do they attribute that to, maybe? I can reach out to some local places here.
That would be,
Edward.
if you want to volunteer, that would
You know,
be-
if that
would
sounds
be
like a
great.
reasonable thing, I think everyone does it, it looks good, but, you know, are we successful at it?
Yeah.
And I've been in the industry for quite some time, and it's hard to get it at your workplace to do it right. You know, where you have everything there and you say, hey, you know, and it's like, this is what you gotta do. And so let's maybe there are some things that we can better do, signage or whatever, but I don't mind if I may need a little help, but I think I'll be able to Google who town commissioners are, who would be in charge of the recycling programs at the town, so I wouldn't mind taking that on.
I appreciate it.
And I would just add, I assume other cities would be as well, but people have called us to see what our success rate has been. Lewis called because they discontinued their program apparently some years ago, and there's been a movement afoot to reinstitute it. So they've been talking, as well as Ocean City. We've talked with them. So I'm sure that information's out there, and they'd probably be willing to share it with you.
Okay.
I would
thanks.
assume.
Yeah.
We certainly do.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, and there's a couple
it's-
people at Denrec that are really good to talk to, too.
Okay.
Adam, I forget his last name now. He's like the state recycling man. But
If you want to forward that information over, that would be great, if you
Yeah.
have his contact information.
If you have his contact, I can.
Because just looking from my perspective, and I understand why Lewis may have discontinued the program, because if I'm sitting up there as a commissioner and the success rate is under 50%, and this is how much it's costing to do, in my opinion, then we're recycling for optics only. We're not actually, it's not worth it. So whatever we can do to get that contamination percentage lower is, I think it's going to be necessary for this to continue in Rehoboth. So I think if we can jump on that now and start looking at ways it could be improved, that would be good. With that, any other comments on recycling on the boardwalk?
Well, we did have a study done the last time we tried it and then discontinued it. And I read the report, and I think the main finding was that the way the cans were labeled was too confusing for the public to really understand. But and it can be confusing sometimes. But I've looked at the ones we have now, and they seem better. They seem pretty straightforward. So, but I would suggest looking at that report again. There was a study done here in Rehoboth about our recycling program from I forget how many years ago, where they actually came to some conclusions about why it wasn't successful.
All right, I will get that report and pass it on to all of the committee members. With that, we're going on noon, so I'm going to close the meeting. Are there any final comments from the public? Our next, any final comments from the committee? Our next meeting is September 15th at 10:30 a.m. I'd like to just reiterate, it's my intention to, and I think I'm bringing this up tomorrow. We won't vote on it, I don't think, but to renominate Catherine Bergwin and to nominate Carolyn Diefendorfer, who's been a good audience participation to be committee members. What I also need to know is who on the committee would not like to be renominated as we're going into the annual cycle, to renominate committees. So if anyone is not interested in continuing, if you could email me that. With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 12:01 p.m. Thank you.
Be continued next month.